Good evening, I'm Huel and welcome to my latest video presentation where today we're discussing something that I've had a run-in with before. In fact, the topic perplexes me. As you've already seen in the title and the thumbnail today, we're talking about Lords of the Fallen. Lords of the Fallen is a Souls-like released in 2014 on the Xbox One, PlayStation 4 and PC, and to my surprise it was met with pretty good critic reviews. I'll be talking about that later for sure. However, a couple of years after it was released, yours truly played it. To sum up my experience with it, I wanted to take a dump inside my computer because I committed the sin of storing that piece of shit. My impression of it was not very good. We'll put it that way, but recently, much to my surprise, it's getting a sequel with a rather creative title, mind you. The Lords of the Fallen. Damn, that's some revolutionary naming convention. So, with that in mind, I'm going to do another little retrospective, or review, of Lords of the Fallen. Part 1. Lords of the Fallen. A little disclaimer, I'm not planning to fully finish the game because there really is only so much my mind could take. In my previous video I managed 10 hours or so, but now my mind is not as resilient, so I will not finish the game as the amount I have played is enough. There really is only so much suffering my brain is capable of. Moving on. Okay, so when it comes to games like this, the key is gameplay. Without it, these games are nothing. Souls-like games rely entirely on it when the main methods of play concern attack, dodge, defense, and so on and so forth. Imagine a Souls-like game that doesn't, and you end up here, with me, questioning every decision I've ever made. The biggest problem with the gameplay, which I will talk about first, is balancing. Balancing is important to making a game feel fair. Every game tries to do it, and most Souls-like game does it exceptionally well. Lords of the Fallen... Lords of the Jimmy Fallon. Lords of the Fallen, however, fails dramatically. Firstly, the hitboxes must have been programmed by Guerrilla with a Fisher-Price calculator. But not universally, only from playing. The hitboxes of the enemy are perfectly fine. It's wonderful. Everything connects as it should. Damage is registered when it should, but my hitbox, at times, I will admit, behaves like there's a delay. Like, imagine you're walking around and you notice your shadow, but all the movements you make are repeated like half a second later. Wouldn't that freak you out? But no, the hitbox seems to exist somewhere else entirely, so many times I've noticed that the enemy hits when they shouldn't even be close. It's weird, and nobody wants it to happen. Playtesting was a thing before this game was made, right? Yeah, it was. So what's your excuse, City Interactive? And Deck 13, don't think I forgot about you. Then it's the stamina. As expected, the stamina for the player is limited once you run out. Your attacks either don't happen or are much slower. Same goes for defense and dodging. For the enemy, however, stamina doesn't seem to be an issue. So, for example, when I go up against little Jimbo Satan over here, right, I never even get a chance for a swing or two. These guys do not stop. Now, yeah, most of them leave enough gaps between attacks and defense where you can get a couple of decent jabs. But these dudes, these layabouts, not worth their weight in cat turds, they are cowards. Do you want to know why? The developers, in their infinite wisdom, they decided that enemies with shields should never be able to drop their guard, be vulnerable in any even minor way. Basically, enemies with those big shields have a near impenetrable defense. But when you have a shield, you can't do a damn thing. Eventually, you will always run out of stamina, when these guys seem to have a meter as endless as space. Also, as enemies with large, cumbersome shields, you expect a little bit of build-up to their movements, right, and attacks, but no. It turns out a lot of these guys have some of the fastest actions in the whole game, and that's not a very well-balanced enemy. When their defense, damage, and speed are so high, you might as well try and fight God himself. Alright, 2 videos in a row, biblical, some kind of biblical reference to religion or something. It's also a little silly to make certain things rather redundant. What use is the shield? Truly. Redundant is the wrong word. Useless is the right word. I never felt like this served any good purpose. The damage they absorb is not worth the stamina loss because as soon as you're done taking it, you won't have enough to give one back. The riposte is also another problem. Dark Souls, Jedi Fallen Order has a riposte or parry ability which really helps in combat. To have an opportunity to not only interrupt attacks but also stagger your enemy for a few seconds, I'd take it. Obviously you have to time it right, but it's an extremely useful mechanic. Lords of the Fallen, however, seems to throw the idea of timing out the window. Pick a fucking window, as my aunt would say. For a while, I tried using a combination of a one-handed weapon and a buckler. I like a good, speedy, dodgy type guy. And thank God I do, because not only is defense not a good option, riposte might as well not exist. The timing is far too specific. Do you want to know how many times I succeeded in pulling one off? Take a guess. No. I'll give you a few seconds. It's okay. You guessed? You done it? Okay, whoever said 1, I'm going to send you some of my bathwater. I pulled it off once. No matter how many times I tried to do it, as far as I can tell, the timing is to the frame. We're not all speedrunners. When it comes to games that are heavy on reaction-based mechanics, asking the player to have such a specific timing is a massive slap in the face. That sucks. And ultimately limits playstyles. What's the point in offering a mechanic when you make it so mind-numbingly difficult to use? It becomes some mystery feature that nobody will ever know about. On the same button you use for riposte is Shield Bash, which is again useless. I've barely used it as, like I said, serves no real purpose. The animation is slow, the damage done is negligible, and the worst part is, it doesn't even stagger the enemy. Imagine getting bashed hard in the face by a massive flat board of wood. Two things I would expect from that is, one is a broken nose, and a pretty big loss of balance. What happens in Lords of the Fallen? Take a guess. Take a guess, go on. I'm giving you another few seconds. Alright, whoever said nothing is getting a second little pot of bathwater. No staggering, no stun, not even an interruption of attack. But you know what's even worse? Nearly anything any enemies do to you, any attack, anything, it staggers you, interrupts your attacks. The balancing is worse than the Costa Concordia when it hit the coast. Here's yet another thing. Projectiles from enemies in a normal game, hell, especially in reality, they travel in roughly a straight line, right? If an arrow is shot, it won't change direction unless, I don't know, it's some kind of exterior factor like wind. So we've established this, right? This is common sense. Something gets like thrown, shot, whatever, it will continue on its original trajectory. Majority of the time, excluding external factors. You know what arrows and bolts do in this game? They track you. They goddamn track you. Why would you do that? Forcing you to dodge every arrow, especially when you have melee enemies surrounding you with like mixed opponent situations, with their own attacks simultaneously, is absolute bullshit. The things even make you stagger backwards sometimes, like you got washed over by a tidal wave. Alternatively, you do have your own projectile weapons, the Gauntlet. The question of balancing returns to haunt us all. Your projectile will always travel straight, or at least exactly where you're aiming. So why is it one rule for me and another for thee? What's the point? Why go out of your way to make this game so clearly unfair? Even these little guys who would jump at you, but then magically defy the laws of physics to invade your personal space and fuck you up. What's even worse is the damage, like it's bitching. I hate these things. Honestly. The funniest part is though, like the bosses are the easiest enemies. I even thought the same thing in my first playthrough because their attack patterns are consistent and balanced. I guess like all the effort went into the bosses and then they gave up whenever the CEO said, push the game out your ass, instead of actually putting some time into it in order to make sure that the game, handles correctly. Also, shame on this utter Dollops lineage because he could fully regenerate his health. Fuck this guy. The map design, like I said in my older video, is severely limited. There are 3 sections: the Citadel, the enemy home, and some stupid spiritual place I'm not even going to bother going to. Yes, there are alternate routes and shortcuts to find that give you extra little things, but the rewards given out are not worth the exploration. What you pick up as a result of your exploration is also a massive gamble. You kind of expect the game to notice the patterns in your playstyle and give you stuff that would reflect that a little better, but I played for like, 7 hours, right? All I ever got was medium and heavy armor and weapons, and, well, I find that completely useless, because, well, of their weight. It's that one grandparent at Christmas that doesn't understand the VHS tapes aren't a thing anymore. So the enemies have superpowers, I'm not motivated to explore anything, the items you find are all for heavy armor and weapon builds, and worst of all, it encourages you to explore different playstyles, but the game makes anything other than light armor completely non-viable. The story is something to do with some conflict between Antanas, who is allegedly the good guy, and the Rogar, who are definitely the bad guys, because, look at them. Well, these guys look good to you? There's something about this guy called Adir. Don't know much about him other than he's like, a neutral party or something. Spoiler alert, by the way, Antanas, this guy, is the last boss after he transforms, and our buddy Kaslo here is a representation of Adir. Woo! Michael Jackson. Woo! I can't do it. Then there's the characters. The main one is Harkin. I didn't know Sam Worthington in the games too. There's more personality than Rice Krispie. Kaslo is actually kind of cool. Rogar have nothing interesting about them other than they're trying to kill you. This lady, Yetka, I think, I'm yet to care, wants to avenge her parents through some kind of hidden pathway or something. Antanas is obviously the main bad guy and is a bit of a dick anyway. Any other character you meet, they might as well not exist. Honestly, the lack of any kind of creative talent on this project is shocking. I can't even blame the voice actors this time. Like, you have to go off the material, and guess what? The material does nothing. Nobody has any personality, none of their own motivation to speak, no relatability. I don't know what else to say. I like Kaslo, though, because he was like the one guy. He was like the Mr. Rogers in this game. Only dude that liked me for me. At least that's something. What really sucks is how disappointing this all is, because you know what? It actually looks really good, graphically speaking. The textures are abundantly rich. The models are top-notch. On paper or in the trailer, the game looks great. It's no wonder it did so well, but once you get into it, the cracks form, and they form hard. Even the small things point to a deeper problem that's what's on the surface. Cutscene animations somehow become a hilarious issue because the combat animations look great, you know, they look really, really good. But once you get into cutscenes, however, it's like Sonic 06 and Batman 99 or something like that. Like, look, Michael Keaton got rotoscoped for this one bit. Overall, this game tried to appeal to every playstyle possible, when really the strength for all the From Software games comes from how they favour a particular style of play. For example, if we look at Sekiro, the entire game is based around moving quickly, dodging, parrying attacks. Dark Souls, on the hand, is a bit more general, but makes a heavier and defensive strategy more viable. Trying to cater to every style possible ends up appealing to nobody. It feels empty and frustrating because instead of making every playstyle viable, it makes none of them viable. You can't parry, blocking is a waste of stamina, the dodge rolls are unpredictable when quick and a static street dance when encumbered, but worst of all, the lighter weapons are quick but too weak and the heavy weapons are slow, you might as well jump off the walls before the enemies push you. There is no sweet middle spot where you can really make the game work for you. Whether you use light, medium or heavy loadouts, you will still have a bad time. One thing I never thought I'd be doing in my future is wasting even more of my time talking about this game. Part 2. Other Souls clones. I think it's worth mentioning games that also try to recapture the same feeling of Dark Souls. So, my first go-to is always Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. It's an external studio from Software, and, you know, I've also, you know, like the Bible, it's getting mentioned second time in a row now. But that's the thing, Fallen Order is itself a Souls-like game. It has the same principles. Timing-based combat relying on dodging, parrying, and attacking with a force added in for good measure. It's much more story-driven than a typical Souls-like, but it still holds true to the genre. The characters are well-crafted, and the story is motivating and worthwhile, but most importantly, the game actually feels balanced. The game is a bit difficult, yes, as per the design ethos of the genre, but it holds balance very well, as I never feel like certain enemies are impossible to deal with. Like, these guys, even the Purge Troopers, who are likely meant to be the toughest enemies in the open world, after getting used to them, they can be dealt with quite nicely. It's just a case of getting used to patterns and getting used to their attacks and timing. What I'm trying to say is Respawn Entertainment pretty much did what City Interactive set out to do, but did so in a much better way. I know there are some divisive opinions about Fallen Order, but to me, it's just so wonderful. What I'm trying to say is Respawn Entertainment pretty much did what City Interactive set out to do, but way better. But even when comparing thematic and story things, lore-wise, Fallen Order still makes sense. Harkin, Lord of the Fallen, is a fairly hardened criminal. The tattoos on his face represent different crimes that he's committed, right? Lore-wise, he should be able to kick Roger ass in the second he sets eyes on him. Does he? No. Actually, I've already made it clear how the game doesn't want you to achieve any kind of success. Fallen Order, Cal, the main character, it makes sense that he's not a straight-up Jedi Knight. You know, he's not powerful in Jedi terms, he's pretty underpowered. You know why? Dude hasn't been in connection with the Force for like 9 years or something. The whole point of Fallen Order is the idea of progress and letting go of baggage. It makes sense that you go from someone who can't do anything to a formidable fighter. I know Fallen Order was made a few years later, but you know, From Software managed to build this in 2009 in a cave with a box of scrap! It's obvious that From Software is a studio that truly understands the genre they themselves develop. Have they actually made like a truly bad game? Like, actually. And also, yes, City Interactive and Deck 13 were the first studio to try a Souls-like outside of From Software, but to miss, well, as far as I can tell, but to miss so much of everything, to miss the point. Dark Souls doesn't even have cutscenes like Loft. But, you know, I would care about literally anyone else more in the Dark Souls series than even the main character of Lords of the Fallen, which is itself supposed to be a player insert and an empty shell. The main lesson I'm trying to get to is if you're going to take inspiration from something, looking at the surface level of everything is not good enough. Making it unbearably and unfairly hard is not enough. The challenge is balanced, the story worthwhile. I'm glad Respawn made the game they did because I thought it was a masterpiece and a huge, true tribute to the genre. Loft, on the other hand, feels like one of those weird rip-off movies of Hollywood blockbusters you nan gets to you by mistake. Part 3. The reviews. When Lords of the Fallen came out, it received reviews with a lot of variety in opinion. The positive ones are the most suspicious pieces of writing I've ever seen. Like, the reviews from players are also mixed, but that's not too important right now, so, whatever. The main thing that surprises me is how positive a lot of these reviews are, and I have no idea why. The issues are so glaringly obvious that it's painful. Beyond painful, actually. We've already talked about that. Anyway, there are quite a few of these confusingly positive reviews. Leif Johnson, for example, reviewed it on Obtuga. Leif Johnson, for example, reviewed it on October 28th, 2014 for IGN. I know, it's IGN, but the majority of the article has a lot of questionable claims. The opening paragraph immediately makes me want to pluck my pubes. I forgot I wrote that. 45 minutes passed in Lords of the Fallen before I died for the first time. That's a bit of a surprise for a game that makes no secret of its heavy debts to the ultra-punishing, yet also ultra-rewarding, Dark Souls series. But the combat I experienced on the way to that first death revealed a game that's just as concerned with letting us have fun without the pain. No, the game is not concerned with you having fun in the first No, the game is not concerned with you having fun in the first 45 minutes. The game made that very clear to me with so many problems I've already listed. It mentions other things like a tempting risk-reward system that caters to multiple playstyles, but that's also a goddamn lie. Like I said, exploration and combat doesn't offer anything special because guess what? The rewards only cater to specific playstyles. Now, after this, me and my buddy here, Leaf, we actually agree on a few things. How the detail and design of the characters isn't bad, that the world and enemies are a little bit uninspired, but then he says something about the game being easier than Dark Souls. Well, yeah, a bit. It is and it isn't. Basically, the game would be easier than Dark Souls if the game actually worked. Sometimes it felt like me and Leaf played completely different games. In the past, I played Warrior. Today, I played Cleric. Both suck, but he keeps talking about the special class skills that I found to be entirely unnecessary and massively underwhelming. While he had an amazing time with the power behind his skills, to me, the use of them were next to useless. One skill in particular was like an effigy. It distracted enemies away from you and took the hits. It barely worked because most of the time they just walked right past it. And I did upgrade that spell, by the way. And his points about runes is bullshit. I don't even know if I was using it right, but none of them even worked, man. Or at least barely did anything. I attached a fire rune to my armor, but this guy's fire attacks didn't seem to calm its tits. But I'm glad we agree on the gauntlets being like some of the most powerful weapons in the whole game. I relied on it so much. Especially against enemies with ridiculously good defense. If it wasn't for the gauntlet, I think I would have had a far worse time. And another one, the bosses, apart from like the graveyard guy, I found them to be way too easy and I killed them all on my first try. But yet again, I find myself feeling like we played an entirely different game. In his verdict, Leaf says that the hero so easily achieves great power and defense and makes risk obsolete. Then goes on to say how it's a more accessible Dark Souls style experience. I would say more a Dark Souls experience if From Software needed money for crack. The way I would put it is that the resources the player has in comparison to the enemy makes defense obsolete, and any risk taking at all is simply not worth the reward. The worst contender when it comes to reviews though, and this one's a doozy, Kevin Van Ord wrote a review for GameSpot, and it fries my ketchup. I don't know what else to say. I'm skipping most of the review to focus on one specific paragraph, and you'll understand why after I read it out to you.
Superficially, you could call Lords of the Fallen a Souls game for the meek and the uninitiated, but it earns more respect than such a flippant description. Lords of the Fallen isn't about the game that it isn't, but the game that it is. It's about the ghoulish blacksmith, his glowing eyes, and the long tufts of stiff hair that rise from his scalp. It's about the crunches of iron against bone when your hammer finds its mark. It's about taking in new sights and sounds, and about finding new ways to travel to old ones. It's about that suspended bridge, the monuments that guard it, and the creatures waiting within. Harkin may have no use for these places, but there are riches inside, nonetheless.
That was the biggest load of horse I've read in my life, apart from maybe the iron crunching against bone. Mr. Van Orden me a rare bit because I'm about to go ham, has just given us a list of the most blatantly boring and most unimportant things about Loft. Nobody cares about Harkin, nobody cared about the blacksmith, and nobody cares about this utter grease fire's hair. Look at how that whole bit is worded, okay? Read it for yourself. The dude was going through the game with a fine comb to find a positive spin on this game at all. He tried so hard, and I'm not going to blame Van Oord. I think his boss just doesn't be nice about it. I know people can like different games, but I can't see so many people playing this game and thinking, damn, bro, this is good. There are way too many problems in too many places in the game for there to be an overall positive experience. Part 4. The real reason is getting a sequel, and we all know why. Alright, so we've been critical, we've been analytical, I've been pretty insulting. I feel bad about it. People work hard, I'm sorry, but hey, it's entertaining. Right? Well, I hope it is. There's always a reason something gets a sequel. It's not quality, and there have been countless pieces of media that have deserved sequels but never did. A second season of Firefly, Conker's Bad Fur Day, a third Hellboy movie, Dread, District 9, the list goes on. A lot of these movies have the title of cult classic, cult meaning, a following well after the initial release, but to me, cult really means financial failure. Same thing happened with Big Lebowski and Idiocracy, did terribly at the box office, but earned a well-deserved following afterwards. Is this game a cult classic?
Don't insult me! That's a disgusting thing to say.
Lords of the Fallen is getting a sequel because it sold over 3 million copies. Being on the optimistic side, with every sale being full price, let's say £50, that's £150 million of gross sales. Its budget was £7.8 million, roughly. That level of return is insane. And from a very uneducated guess, I'd imagine the real profits was around 50 to 80 million pounds or something. Probably, drastically and way out of the ballpark. I'm very wrong, because I am not, a money guy at all. I do not understand that shit. But that is also taking into consideration the marketing and distribution is nothing to sneeze at, but I don't know how much all that costs, so, you can smack me on the bottom and call me an idiot if you want. After the video, though. And we're going to be family friendly for you too. But what confuses me most about this is why people want their money back on it. I don't know who you people are out there. The other 3 million sales and the number of people who didn't regret it, I commend you. Your mind is made of far stronger stuff than mine. So because the game sold over 3 million copies in total, that level of return warrants a sequel. Because money. And you know what? I might actually play the next one. Part 5. My hopes for the game. Alright, so I've harped on City Interactive a ton in this video, and frankly I'd say it's at least a little deserved. I played some of their other games as well, for fun and for analysis. Especially this one, the whole series sucks. This one fully deserves me being mean. If you want a video on it, let me know. Anyway, Lords of the Fallen is being developed by a whole other studio now. Sorry, The Lords of the Fallen. I should have said that. And I've seen videos with criticisms on the original where the developers are actively commenting, saying that they're trying to avoid the same issues that the last game had. Well done. I'm proud of you, City Interactive. Good job. I love you. I don't. I am expectant of you. That makes me very happy because, as much as I've practically dropped a log on the hard work of these developers for the first game, they do work hard, and it does show. I'm imagining the very same developers of Hexworks are also putting in a ton of hard work and dedication to deliver the best experience they can for all of us. Do I want the next game to be bad? No. Of course not. I don't want bad games. I don't want bad movies or bad music. It exists, but I don't want it to. Everything that is created deserves to be beautiful, even to at least one person. But being, beautiful to many, that's a sign that the creator has true talent. So, Hexworks, good luck. Keep going. I like the trailer. Your choice of music was interesting. But pay attention to what players criticize, but also what they praise. I believe a fresh perspective on the franchise can deliver us a really good game. It already looks cool with very interesting combat mechanics, and I'm expecting myself not to be disappointed. I might be setting myself up for disappointment, who knows. But thank you for watching. I have been Huel, and man, this video was long. Oh my god, why did you stay around? Go to bed. Oh baby, you must be so tired. Just Okay, good night, baby. Love you.